What's up, everyone? My name is Matthew Dale. Happy New Year. Happy 2024. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and New Year season. I have got a bunch of great content lined up for you all this year, but first I wanted to walk through a preset that I put together, an epic 90s throwback preset that I put together for a New Year's Eve gig that I did with the band The Mighty Pines here in St. Louis. Now, you may know of or be aware of the lead singer of the Mighty Pines. His name is Neil Salsic, and he was featured on The Voice a couple of seasons ago. He actually went pretty far. Now, their regular guitar player was out of town, so they gave me a shout, and I had the pleasure of playing this gig with them, which turned out to be a fun and pretty rowdy time. Now, in this 90s throwback show, we did songs from Green Day, Blink-182. We also did some Counting Crows. I got my set list called up right here. We did some Bonnie Raitt, Nirvana, obviously, Blues Traveler, Sister Hazel, Four Non Blondes, the Cranberries, and we did a number of, I guess what I would call one-hit wonders from the 90s as well. So I needed to cover a decent amount of ground, which is kind of what I did in this preset. I didn't want to do a whole bunch of like preset swapping. I wanted one preset with seamless switching from sound to sound to do all of my work for me, and I was able to fit that in really well and have a really good sonic control and pedalboard experience on the FM9, and I still got a bunch of headroom to add some more stuff to this if I need to. So I'm going to walk you through this preset. Let's start with the amp and cab, and once again, I'm sitting at right around like 60% on this preset, so there's still a ton of headroom in here. For the amp choices, and you'll notice I got some clever things going on here where I'm using the multiplexer to actually do my amp switching for me, and this top amp block is going to be my dirty amps, and this bottom amp block are going to be my clean amps. I built in 6 amplifiers into this preset. However, I found that going through rehearsals and everything, I really only needed 4 amplifiers, so I really didn't use the middle 2 that I'll kind of walk through and show you. So the amps are going through the multiplexer, and they are going into these V30 cabs. Now, these cabinets and a lot of my amp tones, as well as a bunch of other effects found in this preset, are also available in my block library. So if you want to download some of my favorite sounds for yourself, head over to matthewdale.com/blocks, and you can download my block library, my fractal block library for yourself. However, if you do, I'm going to go through this preset pretty quick in this video. If you want to take a deeper dive into this, you can download this exact preset over on my Patreon. I will link to that in the description box below. So let's go ahead and hear now on my clean amplifier. Let's start with that. I'm using the Twin Reverb. Pretty common clean amplifier of the ages. Going into these, I'm using these V30 cabs for everything. On the bridge pickup of my DGT, which is what I played that night, it sounds like this. And if I go up, it's still pretty sensitive, so where if I go up, let me just go over to my amplifier here. If I go up to the middle position, the 2 humbuckers, it softens up. And the neck humbucker cleans up even more. And it sounds great on single coil. So here's both pickups in single coil. And then the neck in single coil. This sound is really good for that sort of thing. We played that song. I really didn't need much on that song other than a really nice, jangly, clean sound with a single coil in the neck and a Fender amplifier. Later on, I did throw a CE2 on it, found by this chorus. I have this hooked up in parallel, CE chorus with a slower rate, and it sounds like this for that second half of that song. And you'll notice in other sounds that I go through, the CE2 comes back again on a second channel. We'll get there in a second. So now for the Green Day and the Blink-182 and the Pearl Jam stuff that we were doing, I needed something that was going to be a little bit dirtier, well, a lot a bit dirtier, something that was going to be more of that American style high gain amp, something like a Mesa Boogie. I chose to go with the Rev Purple on here. This is very dual rectifier-ish sounding, but I find that this amp model lends itself to modeling really well. I think this is a really easy amp to dial in. This is the Rev Gen Purple on the number 2. It's the aggression switch over on number 2. For that sort of thick, heavy distortion sound. Now, some of the keen-eyed and keen-eared among you will know that Basket Case, that Green Day song, is actually tuned down a half step, and I've got different tunings set up in my pitch block here. So here's tuned down a half step. And I did really the virtual capo for all my switching. I just brought this guitar, left it in standard tuning except for 1 or 2 songs that I did in drop D, and then I used the pitch block for my Dtune stuff. While we're talking about Dtune, if I hold in, let me show you my switching here for a second too. We'll take a little bit of a digression. I'm using mostly this altered effects page. This is my custom effects page that I have, and you can see I just have per preset overrides over all of this. So this is the main page that I'm using to go through my sounds. So here is the Dtune block. As I hold this in, it will change the channels, and then I can activate and deactivate that with the touch of a switch. I've got a lead boost. My amp switch, this is the multiplexer. It's changing the channel there. If I just go back over here, again, I'm going through this stuff real fast, but you can see this toggling between channels A and B, and that's selecting either row 3, which this amp is on, my dirty amp, or row 4, which is my clean amp. The light down on my foot switch is off when I am playing clean, and then it lights up when I'm playing dirty, kind of like what you would expect with an amplifier foot switch. And then over here, I've got all of my other commonly used effects, a drive block, this lo-fi thing that I will talk about in a second, the CE2, a tremolo, and I'll talk about this lead boost here in a little bit. Now, this switch over here, if I just go to this one, this is actually, I don't use this feature all the time, but when you do use it, it ends up working really well. It's actually a scene increment and a wrap. Since I'm only using scenes 1, 2, and 3 in this preset, I just have them to cycle and wrap around. So you can see over here, let me go back to my amplifiers. Here's the Rev. It is the Rev Purple and the Twin Reverb. Scene 2 is going to be the Shiva and 12AX7. Again, I didn't actually really use these. I'll play you some sounds, but I didn't find that I really needed these in the show much. And then the next one is actually 2 instances of the Rev Green. One that's going to be a little bit lower gain, and one that's going to be a little bit altered and higher gain. So as per comparison, here is the Twin Reverb. Here's the Rev. Let's advance. This is the AC20. Voxy sounding. Here's the Shiva. Kind of a dark Marshall type sound. And then the ones that I used a lot of time, the greens. Here's the Rev Green Clean. Something that's a little more plexi-ish. It's got the kind of the high end, but not too much high end. And then that's the cleaner setting. Here's the higher gain setting. Now, I could have done these with I could have just stayed on this amplifier and done this with scene controllers, but since I already had the multiplexer set up to do my amp switching for me, I just did another instance of the Rev Green. Let's go back and talk about this. If I hold in my CE2 button, it will switch me over to channel B, and I've got a much more aggressive chorus sound. If I turn this on, it sounds like that. If I hold in my Dtune and go back to channel A, which is going to be a whole step down, Now I've got the sound that I use for... And now here's the lead boost. I'm taking a little bit of liberties there with that dirty sound from my lead boost with a little bit extra delay, but sometimes that helps in a live environment. Here's what's going on with the lead boost. I've got the multi-tap delay, which is pretty amazing. Quarter note on one side, dotted eighth note on the other side, and then I've got some really short delays here just to give me a little bit of extra chorusing for this really great width sound, stereo width sound that I can get in a live environment. I did go stereo for this gig, which was very appreciated and great sounding. The other part of this, I have this assigned to a control switch. The other part of this is a 4 dB. I found that a 4 dB boost worked well in this environment to lift me up over the band, although I'm still kind of convinced that I might have had a limiter on my channel because I played around with this, and at least on my monitor, from where I was in my monitor, it seemed like I could really turn this up even more, and I wouldn't get that much more volume out of my monitor. Probably different front of house, but there might have been a limiter in place on my monitor. So something to be aware of if you are setting up and going direct at a gig. You might want to ask them if there is a limiter in place on your channel or on your monitor feed, and if you would like that adjusted or turned off completely. However, be careful of that, because if something does spike or something gets unplugged or yada yada yada, any number of reasons that could hit you in the face with a whole bunch of sound. A couple of other things that I have as always on type of effects. The compressor over here is just doing a little bit of what I would call studio compression, just so that I fit kind of within my own sound and fit within the mix a little bit more. If I bypass this, and then engage it, it's just giving me a little bit of, it's lifting some of the quiet notes and it's reducing my my overall dynamic range just a little bit so it fits within a band setting a little bit better. This is a great studio-esque trick to run a light compressor after the amp and cab. I'm also running a parametric EQ just to take care of some of the harsh high frequencies and especially some of the excess low frequencies. I cut this all the way up to 140 hertz, and don't be afraid to go beyond this if necessary. This Rev amp can be very bassy at times, especially on some of the more Dtune stuff. Now, this drive block is doing a couple of different things. You'll notice that I don't have Scene Ignore on this particular block. Most of my blocks I have Scene Ignore on, so that I'm treating my effects layout. If I go back to my effects layout here, I'm treating this as mostly like a pedal board. But I don't have Scene Ignore on my drive control, and here's why. I've got the Klon model paired with these amplifiers. So if I'm playing on the twin reverb and I want just a little bit of amp push, an amp pushed type sound, and then if I turn this off, if I go to the Rev, that pushes the Rev a little bit more. So when I go to the other amps, it switches to the hard fuzz type. And I used this sound mostly for like Four Non Blondes, What's Up. That sort of sound there. It also gave me a really good octave sound for Flagpole Sitta. That hard fuzz model works really well for that sort of thing, even in an already crunching amp. There's the amp sound. Now, this gained up Rev Green model also sounds really good with slide. This is what I used on the Bonnie Raitt tune, something to talk about. Now, I already went through one of the filter blocks in here that I use for my 4 dB boost, for my lead sound, my lead boost. There is another filter in here that just shelves a ton of low-end off. This thing is brought up all the way to 430 hertz, and this is like a lo-fi setting that I used for some of the Green Day stuff, where if I'm on this sound typically, and let me go ahead and get the Dtune thing in here as well. This is down a half step. And then for the verses, so I can use that effect to really kind of go down to the small lo-fi thing and then kind of expand to be a little bit, well, a lot of it of a bigger sound, a bigger sonic spectrum that I'm covering. Last but not least is a wah. You certainly need a wah, especially for even flow, if by Pearl Jam, if you're doing all the lead stuff, which I was doing. And this, I've got the level turned down just a little bit because it was a little bit spiky. But otherwise, I'm just using the Clyde, and this is basically stock. I really like the way the Clyde sounds. If I'm playing on the Rev, and you can combine that with the lead boost for some epicness. And that is also controlled. I'm using the auto off feature set to 95% so that it is not there when I don't need it there. Once again, you can play this preset for yourself. Just head over to my Patreon. It'll be linked in the description box below, and you can take a much more in-depth stab at playing some of the tones in this preset. If you do want my block library, again, for free, you can head over to matthewdale.com/blocks, and I will see you all more throughout this year and in the next video. Cheers.